Good evening and welcome to a special telecast of the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit. I have with me the External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar. This is a very interesting time, but as the Minister was telling me, all times are interesting and every year is interesting in its own way. I want to start, Minister, with a slightly macro question. Around 5 years back, there was a sense that there was a stable global order, both geopolitically and economically. Globalization seemed to be the model that would work. And things seemed settled. But over the last 5 years, over the last decade really, but increasingly so over the last 5 years, we've had many shocks to the system. COVID, of course, is one shock to the system. What's happening with the climate crisis is another shock to the system. Geopolitical conflicts have always been there, but they are now causing untold havoc when it comes to supply chains and the economic impacts that they play out. And things suddenly look a lot more unsettled. How do you see the future going forward, the medium-term to long-term future going forward? Are we in for a period of churn? Or will things settle down again, or will we find a new equilibrium?
Well, first of all, let me say it's a great pleasure to join you today. And through you, I send my good wishes to all the people who are watching the summit and reading your newspaper. I think it's a good note to start the conversation, because I would actually say probably from about 2008, and I use 2008, the global financial crisis, as the inflection point, you can say. I use that to actually underline that the globalization model has been more and more challenged. You had political manifestations of that. I think Brexit was one manifestation. Election of Donald Trump was a manifestation. What you had economic manifestations which people were in denial about. I think there was a kind of a globalization mantra which a lot of people, including in our country, bought into without too much application of mind and too much thinking of our own interests out there. And in a sense, the COVID brought out into the open a lot of the problems which till then had been kept firmly under the carpet. So we actually saw that supply chains were very fragile, that production was actually overly concentrated, that people were dependent on limited geographies. And by the way, a lot of this was being politically leveraged as well. So it wasn't just, I'm not talking purely from an economic efficiency viewpoint. I'm even reminding you how in the last 10 to 20 years, actually the globalization was being politically utilized to actually for national advantage and to shape global politics. So you had all of this one after another building up. I think the Ukraine conflict has added to the stress factors. My sense is there are some long-standing issues. Fragility can be enhanced by terrorist actions. This year, you've seen how actually climate change is affecting the global economy.
Well, what does it mean for policy? What does it mean for foreign policy specifically? And you mentioned leadership. What does it mean for the country's approach to various factors? Because at the end of the day, we have a population of 1.3 billion and there are challenges. There are huge challenges. Food is a challenge. We are an extremely food secure nation, but something like the climate crisis could actually jeopardize that too. Economic factors that are happening around the world do have a cascading effect on what is happening in our country. So how do you create your own policy? How do you draft your policy? What are the inputs that go into it?
So there is today hedging, de-risking, redundancy, a kind of a self-reliance going on. So to my mind, when people, today look at the government's goal of an Atmanirbhar Bharat, we should not think of it, in that old sort of primitive globalization, non-globalization, we are going back to protectionism. I think this is a new era. We need, as a big polity, with very large vulnerable sections in this country, to actually see how do we safeguard ourselves in a difficult era. How do we build those capabilities in a difficult era? So it is a mindset change, it's a capability change, it is a strategic change.
Because of the